I think the Iranian thing is very simple. Are you willing to accept them having nuclear weapons or not willing to accept them nuclear weapons? I mean, everything else becomes secondary. You've got to first decide if, after you're done dancing, you're going to accept them having nuclear weapons, you have one set of possible strategies. If you're determined that they not have nuclear weapons, I believe you have to ultimately be for regime change, because there's no practical scenario in which you can take out their weapon systems without them rebuilding them. And you can't go back in and take them out every 4 years because the world in the long run won't tolerate it. And furthermore, we don't know. I see all these studies. I was asked to come in and read the various reports on WMD in Iraq after it got to be a big mess. And I read the original reports. You know, the CIA was years off in estimating when the Soviets would get an atomic bomb. They were very far off on the Pakistani atomic bomb. This idea that somehow we have magically accurate intelligence and therefore we have lots of extra time, or we don't have extra time, or is it 6 months or is it a year? This is baloney. The truth is they have hardened their systems. They have put them underground. They took the logical conclusion from the Israeli raid in Osirak in 1981, and they said, gosh, if we build buildings above ground, the Americans will find them and kill them. So they have huge underground facilities. Some of the underground facilities are under mosques. Some of them are in the middle of cities. I mean, the idea that you're going to wage a bombing campaign that accurately takes out all of the Iranian nuclear program, I think is a fantasy. It would be a gigantic mess with enormous collateral civilian casualties. And so I think you've either got to say to the Iranians, you dismantle your program, or we start down the road towards steps that will stop you. And the first steps are serious economic steps, serious political and psychological steps and diplomatic steps. And by serious, I mean, for example, they import 40% of their gasoline. They produce lots of oil. They only have one refinery. They literally have to import 40% of their gasoline. Serious steps would include giving communications equipment to every dissident. Clist and I did a movie on Pope John Paul II and another movie on Ronald Reagan, both of which show you the joint alliance of Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, and Pope John Paul II to defeat the Soviet Empire. Now, we didn't wage a general war against the Soviet Union, but we crowded it on every front. We consciously adopted strategies to undermine and break it. I'll close with this thought, because I think, again, it's one of the reasons I've been using clear language recently in a way to try to get people's attention. Mark Bowden, who wrote Black Hawk Down, wrote a book called Guest of the Ayatollah, which is about the hostage crisis of 1979-1980. The subtitle of the book is Iran's First Shots in the War Against America. This is 1979. Their senior leadership has seen themselves as being at war with us for over 30 years. We keep finding excuses. They've killed Americans in Lebanon. They've killed Americans at Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia. We now believe they trained and supplied al-Qaeda for the embassy bombings in East Africa. They've had a consistent pattern of being our enemies. And we've had a consistent pattern of denying it, apologizing it, walking away from it. I believe we cannot allow them to have a nuclear weapon. Therefore, I believe we have to be for regime change. And I would adopt a strategy that was very clear and said, unless they agree to unilaterally disarm their entire system, we are going to replace their regime. We're ideally going to do it non-militarily, but we are not going to tolerate an Iranian nuclear weapon.
Thank you, Mr.